Good day to you. My name is Tony Ballinger from the Fighting Men of Rhodesia YouTube series. We've got with us today George Parker from Guard Force. It's my second attempt to interview him, but unfortunately, last time the sound system didn't work too well. So here's hoping. George, lovely to see you back again. We've had a trial run, and this time I'm sure it'll work out well.
Yes, thanks, Tony, for giving me the opportunity of going through it again. Let's hope that the second episode is a bit more successful. Nothing worse than a video without sound.
Well, John, he mentioned it on his sit rep that he tried to actually, what do you put writing on the bottom of yours? You know?
Oh, subtitles.
Subtitles. He gave up after 40 minutes. He said,
Oh,
I can't do that.
Subtitles would be an insult, I think.
It would be, and also what happens if a person's blind and likes to listen to it? So
yeah. True.
Anyway, George, let's kick off the standard format. George, give us a little bit of a background of where you came from and how you ended up in Guard Force or any other unit.
Well, I'm originally from Glasgow, and I was born in 53. A number of members of my family had immigrated to Rhodesia later, and before me, and I decided to join them. This was after I was married, of course. I lived in Guernsey, where I live now, in the Channel Islands. I met my wife here, and shortly after our eldest daughter was born, we decided to go to Rhodesia. In that time, of course, Tony, people from the UK were always hankering to go somewhere, usually somewhere sunny. And it was a good opportunity for us. So we went there in 75, and we were there for 5 years, 6 years.
And what was it about Rhodesia that made you go there rather than Australia or anywhere else?
Well, having lived in Guernsey, I'll always say that I would never immigrate to another island. And Australia was just another island to me. Of course, my two brothers live there now, so they're quite happy there. No, it was, I think Rhodesia was, at the time, was the only place where another member of my family lived. So that made it a little bit easier. My sister lived there. She'd been out there for a few years, and it was easy to join her there. And we left, as I say, in 75.
And your first job was straight into Guard Force, or what did you?
Oh no! My first job was at Risco Steel, in the Midlands, in Redcliffe. Had a job there, in quality control. Did shift work there. As I say, we were there for about 6 years. My wife also worked in personnel department in Risco, and Redcliffe was an interesting town. It was quite small by usual standards, but almost everyone worked for the same company, which makes things a little bit easier. So much so that I promoted it quite widely, and so much so that both my brothers and another two sisters came out to Redcliffe to live. They are now scattered throughout the world now. But yeah, we thoroughly enjoyed our time. And jumping ahead a little bit, I'll come back to the historic bit. But we moved to South Africa in 1981. So when we were there for another 12 years. But our time in Rhodesia, I think, was very, very, very lucrative, very productive. We really enjoyed that, and we had a great life there.
And then, of course, was it compulsory for you to go into the military, or did you have a period of grace? How long did that last?
Now, the period of grace for new immigrants was 2 years. So basically, from when you arrived, you had 2 years grace before you had any military commitment. So after the 2 years, and in fact, 2 years to the day, I was called up and went down to Gwello for medical, etc. I'd no objection. I knew it was coming, so I'd no objection. I wasn't so adventurous as to just sign up. And so I waited my papers and went as required.
They were,
medical.
they were incredibly efficient department for snagging people. I mean, I'd been away for 3 years and I barely walked in the gate at Salisbury Airport when my call-up papers arrived. It was incredible.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. It was. Well, everyone had to do their part, you know, in some degree. So, yeah, I wasn't. A lot of people fought against it, but I wasn't. I didn't object to it at all. Anyway, I was called up, and I think I was 24 at the time, so I wasn't a sprightly 17 or 18-year-old who was going to go through the whole thing in Bulawayo and then be selected for various units. I think I was on the borderline. In fact, interestingly, when I first received my call-up papers, they did call me up for full national service, which was the 2 years continuous. And my company, well, Risco queried that because they were short of manpower as well. They queried that and said, no, this guy he's 24. He's married with at that time a couple of kids. So it was they got it changed to just standard call up, which is basically 42 days in, 35 out. So I was sort of surprised when I was allocated, or Guard Force was allocated to me. I always expected to go into 10th Battalion Rhodesia Regiment at Gwello, and but it just so happened that the people that they were looking at that time was for Guard Force, and you can't argue with them too much. Although I did pass a couple of Grey Scouts on the way into the medical, and I asked them any chance of joining you guys, because I like horses like everyone else. But they said no, it was only a Guard Force thing, and they were just there to recruit permanent force. So that was fine. And then about, I don't know, a month later, I was invited to go to Chickaruby, which was the training place outside Salisbury, and that was me for best part of 8 weeks. A variety of training, quite a variety of people as well. A lot of well, you had the usual UK contingent, the usual Rhodesian contingent, quite a few South Africans, and a lot of Portuguese guys who I know very well. So we did. I think we were the 11th contingent for Guard Force.
And was that purely weapons and coin training, or and use of radio, obviously? But what other aspects of training were you exposed to?
Well, there was a modicum of native custom, let's say, you know, a modicum. Certainly not as much training as INTAF guys would get, but we were introduced to it, and introduced to medical and a bit of administrative work. I would say that radio or communications familiarity would be less than 10%, which is fine. Infantry training would be maybe another 15 to 20%. But the rest of it was how to control the guys that are under your command, and how to get to know and respect the people that you were protecting. So that was it was quite a modicum, quite a wide-ranging training. Very beneficial. Of course, when you get to the front line, you realise you've never really got quite enough training. But anyway, we were happy to do that, and as I say, it lasted about 8 weeks, I think, and that made a lot of interesting people. I'm quite surprised even today that we're not really in communication with those guys now. In actual fact, the number of camps that I did with Guard Force thereafter, probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 different camps. I don't think I ever seen one of the 42 guys who did my initial training at any one of those camps, you know. So it was whether they were all spread out or whether they were called up at different times, because 99% of them were certainly not permanent force. But yeah, It was interesting. It was interesting.
How did you feel? Well, okay, by that stage you'd been in the country 2 years. The environment and the people and everything was a little bit more familiar than when you first arrived from Scotland. But going out on your first call up must have been quite a stretch for you.
It was a little bit, because I hadn't grown up. You know, my formative years were certainly not Africanized, so it was very much foreign to me. But nevertheless, I had a degree of management skills in terms of my civilian job. So I worked with Africans a lot. Of course, trying to get into that culture, even if you're a born and bred Rhodesian or South African, is difficult enough. But for someone who, let's say, just stepped off the plane last Tuesday, is is much more difficult.
Mm.
But it certainly didn't hold me back. There was no issue at all. We you know, not
And how did your wife feel about this? Because we always just think of the men, but it's the woman left behind. You know, she's in a foreign country, obviously with two young children. Did that perturb her at all, or was she all for it as well?
Oh, I would say I would definitely not say all for it. You
Yeah.
know, it was you know, it was very difficult for her, and you only find out how difficult it was after the years. You know,
Mm.
but no, during the time she was very supportive. She wasn't a banner waving, you know, person, but she was supportive as much as she could be, because as you say, holding down a job and looking after two kids in a foreign country is certainly not the easiest. But yeah, we've always got those good people back at home.
Mm. Yeah. So time rolled on, and then where was your first deployment, George?
Well, the first deployment was in Toko. It was Now we finished our training probably mid-February, our basics mid-February. My call up was the end of March. As I say, it was 35 days out, 42s in. When I say in, I mean in service.
Mm.
So the first one was in Toko, and we pitched up there at the Guard Force camp, and we were allocated different protected villages to look after. Now I'm far from. I wouldn't say I'm a city boy. I've got my eyes wide open, but some of these places were interesting, to say the least.
Yeah.
So the allocation of my protected village was one called Nyamande, which is about 30 k's from Mozambique. So it was south of the main drag. So I don't know if you know Kotwa. Have you heard of Kotwa?
I've only seen it on the map, to be honest.
Yeah, okay.
I
So
know where it is. Yeah.
yeah. I think it was a sort of an airstrip, and we had some people there, but we were about 30 k's from Mozambique and probably about 25 k's from Kotwa into the bush. My nearest protected village was probably another, I don't know, between 5 and 10 k's away. This village had 24 guards, two of which were senior NCOs, myself, and one or two radio operators. It was so large, Tony, that there was a airstrip inside it. Inside the fence was an airstrip. It held upwards of 6,000 villagers, spread about this vast area. It was very long and narrow. It was fully fenced around, of course, and the keep was in the sort of top right hand corner, in effect. But as it had been run by INTAF before Guard Force took over. I think I was probably the third or fourth keep commander that was allocated to Nyamande after INTAF. We still had an INTAF vedette there. They were all sort of on changeover, but largely the defence was up to us. It was up to us, and we didn't see people from HQ we seen them once, and that was after we got stonked on Easter Monday. So I've been in camp in the PV probably 3 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and we on Easter Monday we got stonked by a potential group of about 15. As you can imagine, and as most of your listeners would imagine, it's quite a sobering experience, because you don't know where they are. You know where they're coming from, but you don't know where they are. All you can do is defend the village as much as you can, which doesn't mean running around the huts trying to, protect people. It means consolidating the keep, consolidating that security base within the village.
And did you have a mortar to fire back?
No,
No.
no. The best that we had was a J3. That was it. There's no mortars, no machine gun, no MAGs or even Brens or anything like that. So the biggest difficulty, I keep saying this because that was my first experience of action, and it's sort of quite comical actually, because the most that I did was stop my guys firing. They would just let rip, just let rip at everything. Look, they're not all like that, because I had a few guys that were eager to go out the fence line and take the offensive, which we had to calm them down a little bit. But these guys just kept firing, and that was a big responsibility to stop it, because you just expend ammunition like it's going out of fashion. Thankfully, there was no casualties on our side. I don't think there was any casualties on their side, but it probably took about 20 minutes, no more than 20 minutes. They burned a lot of the huts. When I say burned them, they're fine RPG2s and tracer and all that, and there was quite a few huts burned. And we got on the radio, or my guy got on the radio to report what was going on, and I'm afraid the response, which was not unsurprising, but I'm afraid the response was, "Hold tight, we'll see you in the morning."
Yeah.
There's nothing else that they could do. I mean, they're 35 k's away on a dirt road. They weren't going to come out, too dangerous. But anyway, we've seen it out. It's quite a sobering episode, as I'm sure you've experienced. It's not very nice. But when we took sort of roll count the next morning, we lost about 2,000 villagers. When I say lost them, I mean they just gapped it. They just gapped straight through the fence, and we could see the holes that were. They just went through. But interestingly, they turned up almost at first light. Come back, wanted to come in. So it was that notion of the headman saying to me, "We feel safer inside the fence."
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question. Were these people on sites going into these areas, or did they sort of kick against it and say, "No, leave us alone"?
Well, of course, the whole concept of PV protected villages was run by INTAF probably about 4 or 5 years before, and what their experience was, I've got no idea. However, in speaking to the locals and getting intel through various meetings and all the rest of it, as long as they could get out and tend their fields or tend their crops or whatever, they were, it was fine. They weren't encapsulated within the protected village 24/7. First light they were allowed out, and last light they came in, and there was a register taken and all the rest of it to see if anyone had failed to come back, which I don't think ever happened. And I'm sure there was a degree of friendly enemy fraternization at some point. It might have been outside. We don't know. But the whole idea of the PV was to protect the people at those vulnerable times, which we tried to do. I mean, there was schools there. There was, as I say, an airstrip. There was schools. There was sports arranged. I would play football with the locals. And there was, if you feel targeted, that's what you got to do. You got to play football with the locals.
Yeah.
But anyway, the fact that I did it, I think it's sort of hearts and minds. It's hearts and minds.
And did you do patrols into the surrounding countryside to stop that interaction between the locals and some tourists lying in the bush?
Rarely. We would check the fence line in the morning, the whole perimeter, to see there was no whatever damage, and there would be the odd going out, but very, very rarely, very rare.
And were they allowed to carry food out? I mean, that could be a sign that they're feeding them. Were they, obviously, if you're going into the lands to work, you'll need maybe a bit of porridge or suds or something. But if you go out with 4 bags and cooking oil and stuff, it's a bit
not allowed.
not
Not
allowed.
allowed. No, they can take water, of course, but they wouldn't be allowed any food. Now that doesn't mean to say that they wouldn't manage to get some food outside. I don't know where, but but no, there was no they couldn't take food. So that was it was difficult for them as well, but at least I think they had the idea that their crops or even I was going to say animals, but I'm not quite sure if they had animals outside the fence line.
Mm.
They were quite satisfied that they could their security was safe.
Mm.
That,
The liberal American press of the time claimed that they were concentration camps, and obviously you saw with your own eyes as a man not born in the country that they weren't. They were there to defend the local population and also to deny terrorists succor and resupply. So that's what it was about, really.
oh yes, I mean I have heard that term concentration camps, and even it still gets bandied around now and again. But I can assure you, they certainly weren't. If you can imagine, before those protected villages were there, you would have 100 different small holdings or small units.
Mm.
And they would be visited every other night by the enemy, I suppose.
Mm.
And you weren't really depriving them of their freedom. They still did what they would always do during the day. Not everyone went out, but they did what they always did. There was no restriction in that way. So no, concentration camps is a bit strong. Protection is the word. Protected villages is exactly the term.
I think if the concept had spread intensely throughout the whole country, it would have been very difficult for tourists coming into the country to be able to sustain themselves. They would have had to do a lot of store robberies rather than going to the locals, which would expose them to ambushes and so on. I think it would have been incredibly effective, but it started a little bit too late, don't you think?
Well, of course, in 78, which was my first camp, it'd probably been going for at least, I don't know, 7 or 8 years before then. That's when they first started. I think the INTAF guys will clarify that. But in the rural areas, you needed that protection. It was absolutely critical. You're right. If it started before, but I think politically you were not going to get that support. It's only when things took a serious turn in the mid-70s that they decided that perhaps the locals should be protected and to deny the enemy that succor of food and all the rest of it. I mean, we had so-called corner stores inside the village.
Oh.
Where the locals could buy the food for their evening meal or whatever, or alcohol or whatever. And so they had that. As I say, they had that. They had schools. Not sure of any churches, but I'm sure there was some church groups. So it was like a proper village,
Yeah. And I believe the psychological operations units used to come into these villages as well. Did you ever have any interaction with them? Theirs was to use psychological tactics for and against them. It sounds crazy, but did you ever interact with them at all? They wore a blue beret?
Only on a personal level. My brother was a sergeant in POU.
Right.
Yeah, so only at that level. We never seen any of those guys come into the villages that I was involved in, which in actual fact was only 2, but we'll come to that later. We seen RIC guys. RIC come in, and we did have a visit once from one of the RR regiments, probably out of Antalya. I don't know. I would hate to say, but to be perfectly honest, whilst the RIC guys and the INTAF guys and all the rest of it were very helpful, the RR guys, I'm afraid, were a bloody nuisance. I think the locals turned against us after that visit, and it took a while to get them back on sides. But anyway, that was the nature of the war, and you see good and bad. One group of individuals that I was very, and I'm quite happy to say it publicly, that I was very disappointed on was the Red Cross. The Red Cross used to fly in a couple of times during that 6 or 7 weeks. They'd fly in and they would treat the locals, which is all very commendable, not an issue. And I did approach one of the doctors and asked them. A couple of my guys were suffering from minor ailments, asked them if they would just have a look at them and see if they would maybe give it. Absolutely not. Refused point blank. And they said, we're only allowed to, to treat or to give assistance to non-combatants. I said, well, that's, deep in your heart, that's not quite true. There was, they supported many different groups, but Rhodesian forces was taboo. They would not give us any support whatsoever. So that they went down in my estimation quite dramatically after that.
It doesn't say much for the Hippocratic Oath, does it? Tend unto all, irrespective of who they are.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But then, yeah, it was more disappointing than anger. As you say, I thought these guys would be, but no, refused to teach them. Refused to treat them in any way. Anyway.
I had the same experience at a mission near Wankie at the Lupani River. We went in there to get water, and they didn't want to give it to us. We got it in the end, of course, but
yeah,
it was that attitude. They were part of the World Council of Churches and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I think the parent body of that whole Swiss Red Cross thing was probably linked into all of that, and that was just their philosophy. And
yeah.
We when I was in Mozambique, we hit a camp there, and all the food that we found afterwards was all donated by the World Council of Churches. And
oh yeah,
we filled our cases on sardines and stuff which we hadn't seen before.
Yeah,
but there was that. Yeah,
I had the same I had the same experience after a contact in Headland, near Headlands. Where we went in and picked up the stuff after the contact, immediately after, and it was full of Danish pilchards, Swedish medical supplies, and all the rest of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Such is the nature of the war.
It was indeed. It was more communist than we realized.
Yeah.
George, had you been given any rank after your training at Chikurubi, or did you stay as a trooper?
No, in actual fact, all Europeans were given the rank of either Keep Commander, which is self-explanatory, equivalent to Sergeant, but the rank is Keep Commander, or Keep Deputy, which is also self-explanatory. I think of the 42 guys in my training unit were 90% were Keep Commanders. It was a foregone conclusion. I think if you could walk and your eyesight was okay and you could hear and you could speak and you weren't too frightened about spiders, Keep Commander was the rank. Otherwise, down the table.
Do you think that caused a bit of resentment amongst the black troopers?
No, you would think so. You would think so because here's this white guy coming in and he's going to lord it all over us and all the rest of it. Of course, you get that situation in all walks of life in Africa. But I never had any problem whatsoever. None whatsoever. Because there was African sergeants and corporals and lance corporals and all the rest of it. And keep sergeants, I think you call them keep sergeants. Africans, and there was never an issue at all. In fact, towards the end of the war, well, I would say probably mid to late 79, the protected villages were run by the African NCOs. So all the Europeans, that we'll come on to that, I suppose, but all the Europeans were pulled out of the PVs at the start of September 78. They pulled them all out. And that was my second camp where I went to Marewa. I was given a PV to look after, and I was there for, I think, 10 days when the local HQ, the regional headquarters pulled us out. And we did, I think we did 2 weeks of infantry training, map reading or refreshing that knowledge. And that was in Marewa, and we formed, which was the basis of 1st Battalion Guard Force, which was the basis of the infantry. And we were given, the patrols were run by the heat commanders, who were now given the substantive rank of sergeant, just to make it more balanced. And in my particular stick, we had 3 sticks, and that was made up of 2 African corporals, myself, and about 18 to 20 guards. And we went out on various patrols, 3 and 4 days, mainly OPs, head for that spot, and sit there for 3 nights and see what's going on. And that was the start of it. And I think we were reasonably successful. So I had no contacts there.
And what rifles and radios were you given? Did the guards still have the G3s or 303s at that point?
No. I never had any of my guards, even in the PVs, have 303s. They were certainly withdrawn, certainly a long time before. No, we had G3s. The odd one had an SLR, but we tried to commonize it by making sure at least the guys in the sticks had all the same weaponry. So it was G3s. You had the benefit of a couple of FOSS grenades and different hand grenades, but no machine guns, no MAG, no mortars, nothing like that. That was the start of it. As far as radio comms, I think we had, if I get the numbers right, I think Alpha 76.
That's right.
Is that right? Or Alpha 82, something like that?
76.
76.
I think the more modern one after that was the 73, but I could have it back to find it.
Right. Very effective. Never an issue at all with those. Our three stick. We used to get dropped off at a specific point at night, and there would be 3 sticks. So you're talking about 18 to 20 men, maybe. And we all, I think we left one near the rendezvous point. That was his OP, and then we headed for the hills, and we just split up and controlled it from there, and then met up.
Who would you report to if you saw something? That you obviously had a headquarter base nearby?
Well, the reporting structure would be back to HQ at Marewa or Kotwa. No, not Kotwa. Sorry, Marewa. Yeah, that's who we would report back to. It was mainly in Mangwende TTL, which I think is south of the main drag, and I can't remember. North was Chikori, I think, or something. Can't remember. But we probably did over that 5 or 6 weeks. We probably did maybe 3 or 4. I'll call it extensive patrols. In other words, 4 days, 4 nights.
And that battalion of infantry, were they spread all over the country, or was it purely in the northeast or somewhere around there?
They started off mainly in the northeast. That's where they did the training. That's when the bulk of it was. I mean, I didn't stay with 1st Battalion after that because I was allocated to farm protection, which is another story. But they were mainly in the northeast. But when they got fully up to strength, probably late 78, they were given line of rail duty. You know that Rutenga to Bite Bridge, where they would protect the rail, either traveling on the rail or roundabout, or doing security patrols around the rail line, because that was the big thing, line of rail protection. 2nd Battalion did the same thing, but they did it in a different place. I'm pretty sure it was from it was in the northwest. Yeah, so 1K, that sort of railhead. You know, they did line of rail protection there. Immediately before the Mugabe elections, they raised a 3rd Battalion. I think they were southeast. I can't quite remember. So there was 3 battalions. I mean, that was quite a number for a small unit. Well,
Yeah.
actually, I say small unit. They were one of the largest units in the Rhodesian forces. I mean, there was upwards of 7,000 men.
Yeah, there was 7,200, and 7.5 battalions is a couple of brigades. It's not small at all, really.
Yeah. So they were taking over. So half the unit was involved in line of rail infantry. The other half was involved in farm protection, which is a big contingent. Farm protection was well, it's self-explanatory, but you were basically one sergeant in charge of, I don't know, upwards of 250 men. There was a couple of NCOs there as well, but we allocated them to different European farms throughout the area. I did farm protection, and we were always based at the crop shop, always based with BSAP, our sort of regional HQ, and the guards were allocated up to 4, 5, or 6 at a time, allocated to different farms. And you know what they're like. You know, the farms in Rhodesia are pretty spread out. You know that, Tony.
Yeah.
So they were allocated there, and the farmers were extremely grateful for that. You know, just having some other people there, some other armed guards to give them some protection, and they got stonked a hell of a lot. The farmers, so they really get hit hard. They are the bravest people I've ever known. The farmers staying out there on their own with their kids, and just waiting for the next attack.
I have put out multiple appeals for farmers to come forward and talk. I think we've had one on the entire series, and I really appeal to farmers who are listening. And
yeah,
I want to hear your stories because,
yes,
like you said, George, they were incredibly brave, and particularly the women, because the men often had to go away on party duties and so on.
Yeah.
Very, very brave people.
Yeah. So we provided that function. But whilst we were on protection, I was out on quite a number of patrols, the odd time with Patu. So my first farm protection camp was at Headlands. So I was based at the police station there. I had 2 incidents at that point. One was a landmine incident near Inyati Mine, which is probably about 10, 15 k's from Headlands. In the bush. I think it's a gold mine. It was a Sunday morning. I'd just arrived in Headlands, and we woke up to this massive thump. You know what a landmine sounds like. And me and 2 European patrol officers from the cops went out to investigate, and it was quite horrendous. It was a Land Rover that had hit this landmine on an approach to a small river crossing. Typical where they're planted. Anyway, they were out doing landmine clearance, and a lot of the time landmine clearance they didn't have the luxury of a Pookie or even the equipment. They would just drive to the main road and check that everything's okay. But anyway, on the return journey, they hit this thing. And the 2 African reservists, one was killed outright, and the other one survived. And we found him, and he died. He died 15 minutes after we got there. He had tremendous injuries, and I never realised, that the majority of injuries on a landmine are your lower legs. Your legs just break because of the force that comes up. And anyway, it came up. Both his legs were in a mess. But he flew through the bush, and that's the only way we found him, Tony. You could see the trajectory that he took, and we got there, and I'll always remember their names, those two guys. They were field reservists, Peter Inu, and the other one was Magarazzi. Both of them, strangely enough, were attested into the BSAP, but they'd come from Mozambique.
Mm.
And they lived on the mine, and they were part of their security. They were policemen. So anyway, they were one of them died, and the other one was killed outright. I think the driver, I don't know how he got away, but he managed to get back to the mine. So that was the first incident.
Was that vehicle mine-proofed?
I very much doubt it. It was basically a Land Rover, and they're as soft as anything.
Good Lord.
So it wasn't even a Kudu or an Impala or sorry, not Impala, no Kudu or a Leopard.
Leopard, yeah.
It wasn't any of those vehicles. It was pretty soft-skinned Land Rover.
Surely the mine management should have been made culpable of that death, or responsible. I don't know if culpable is the right word, but surely it was like I watched a documentary of the British sending Land Rovers to Afghanistan, and they were being popped like corks coming out of champagne bottles.
Yeah.
And I actually went to a meeting with their military here in Salisbury where they were presenting new trucks that they were going to make. And I asked the people there, got hold of the microphone, why on earth are you sending Land Rover? Whoever sends a Land Rover into an operational area should be charged for just being stupid.
Yeah.
I forget what the answer was, and they showed me the alternate vehicles, which I thought were appalling.
Yeah.
But those mine managers should have gone to jail for that.
Yes, I would imagine there would be a few that would be held culpable for that sort of dereliction of duty up and down the country. But you'll know better than I, Tony. In a war situation, you just take it as it is. Only in the luxury of civilian life can we complain about the things that went on. But not to worry. The reason I think of those guys is it was the 22nd of October, that incident. And every 22nd of October, I think of those two guys that were killed. But anyway, so that was in Headlands. The next one was near on the same camp though, was near Mayo. You know Mayo?
I've heard of it, but I never operated on the eastern side of the country.
Oh right, okay. Mayo is not too far from Marandellas, as far as I can work out. But anyway, I took a contingent of guards that were stationed with me at the cop shop up to Mayo just to check a few farms and that. We'd usually do that now and again. Go around different farms, visit the guards, see everything's okay with the farmer. And those farmers would beg us to stay overnight. So it would be me and maybe 3 or 4 guards. And they would beg us to stay. And of course you couldn't. You couldn't really. Because you had to be back at HQ that. But anyway, this one time we went up to Mayo, and the farmers were all Patu guys, as you said. And they asked me if I could, they were going out on a patrol the first light. And they asked me if I could join them with my guys. So I couldn't refuse that. Couldn't say no. So we met up. We met up the night at first light, and these Patu guys. I think there was maybe 5 of them. They had 2 with them. They had 2 African trackers. Yeah. We met up at first light. Went along the dirt road from the farm, and we went into the hills. And these guys picked up a track. They had some in before. Picked up a track, and we must have followed those guys. Must have followed that track for about 2 hours. And we got to. We got to this base of a small gongo, and we started climbing up, and we're still following the track. And this was probably about 11 a.m. in the morning. Almost got to the end, and the Patu section leader said, right, can we do an extended line? And we spread out, 6 feet between each guy, maybe more. And we were in a line, and we were carrying on up with it. And the chap next to me raised his rifle and let off a round. I don't know what he'd seen. And then it was just, all hell breaks loose. And we just carried on up the hill. And there was probably about, I think we found 10 sleeping places. But they'd gapped it over the other side of the hill. Well, 8 of them had. The other 2 are still sleeping. So we, you know, we got those by chance. You know what it's like in a contact. It's just you just don't know what's going on really. So we managed to get 2, and that was it really. That was the only other contact I was in, I think. So again, working with the police was very informative. So these farmers who, 2 days a week are on patrol with Patu is just incredible. Where these guys get their energy, I've got no idea. So
they must have suspected something was going on to ask you to go out on that walk with them.
I think they probably did. I think what had happened was one farm about 10 k's away from Mayo had been hit, and there were sort of farmers roundabout were sort of on alert. Like maybe there's something else, and then I don't know if the police had picked up some spoor from that group, and it was just picked up again near Mayo, and those trackers were just incredible.
Yeah, they're amazing. Yeah. In fact, now that you mentioned the name Mayo, it seems to ring a bell. My brother was in Patu in that area and he got shot in the shoulder.
Was he?
Yeah, so that Mayo, Wedza, somewhere.
In Yazura? Is in Yazura in that area? No.
No, I'm really not familiar with it, but it sort of rings a bell, around the Barangura area.
Yeah, it's not a very big place. They've got a cop shop there, and a couple of stores maybe, but it was not very big, and it was pretty close to TTL. So, yes, so that was that contact in Mayo. So, the other TTL I was thinking of was Uzumba, which is north of Mangwendi, and I think Mayo might have been bordering that. So,
was there any chance to have any type of control, sort of foreign movement with the guys in that contact, or was it just too quick, or did the police take over, or how did it pan out?
No, I do remember we're in the extended line, and the guy raised his rifle. He fired at the same time. I seen one of the other side pop his head up above a rock, and there were just a few rounds let off by everyone. And then the section leader, I remember him calling out, saying, "Right, change mags right now," which is fine. I think I'd fired. Well, I know I'd fired 13 rounds because I checked it on after the event. I knew I'd fired 13, and then we were on the move, and he was saying, "Don't forget, change mags," which we did do. And we just got up and we just ran through their position. But basically, it was like a chase thereafter, which we were never going to win. They got to the other side and were down the other side, and that was it. Luckily, there was no injuries on our behalf. But when you catch an enemy that's sleeping, there's only going to be one winner, I think.
And were your guys chuffed with that contact? Did they feel elated?
They were certainly joyous, more joyous after they'd seen the result, to which they all played a part.
Oh yes, very much so.
They liked the result. They liked the result. Yeah. So it was a good thing. And then we just went back. I think we went back to Mayo, reported in, and I think 3 or 4 days after that, my camp came to an end. That was it. I was back in Civvy Street after that. From then on, I think I went back to Headlands once, and I did farm protection in Kessie, which is a whole different scenario. Headlands is glorious tobacco farms. On the European farming area, of course, tobacco, lovely, beautiful part of the world. Kessie is like a desert, big cattle ranches, that type of thing. But it was entirely different. But the same sort of stuff. We had guards out on farms. We visited them regularly. I also did the same sort of thing in Omnyati Power Station outside of Kwekwe. We had our headquarters there, also farm protection, but we were guarding the power station and another couple of hundred guards out on the farms roundabout, which we paid regular visits to. which was all very interesting. So there was that. There was Kezi. There was the last one I did was Gwanda, which is quite a nice wee town. But that was at the Commonwealth Monitoring Force contingent were based there.
And what did you think of those Wallies? I mean, they're from your own country. Did you well, it's a bit south of your country, but did you get on with them, or did they think it was crazy being stationed there?
Well, I never came across any English regiments,
Right.
or English contingent. I came across the Royal Regiment of Wales, which is ironic because they were the forebear or the descendants of 22 Regiment of Foot, which was the Rorke's Drift guys. So they were sent back to and I thought, well, I'll chat with these guys, Royal Regiment of Fusiliers or whatever they were called now, and I was most disappointed because I was walking along the high street with two of my guards. I think, I don't know, we were going to the cop shop, I don't know. And the Royal Regiment of Wales came up and walked past me and saluted me.
Oh.
And I said, 3 stripes. I don't merit saluting.
Yeah.
But they took it as a joke.
Yeah.
But mostly we were involved with the Kiwis. Kiwis were based there. I didn't come across any guys from Fiji or guys from Australia, but the Kiwis that we spoke to them a lot. Usually in town, they would visit us, but they couldn't wait to get home. You know, they couldn't wait.
They seem to have a kindred spirit. The New Zealanders that I met were very similar to us.
Oh yeah, a lot of them couldn't understand it. You know, they couldn't understand why they could understand why they were sent there, but they couldn't understand the complete lack of support we were getting from our so-called friends. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were great guys. No issues with those people at all. And interesting, they were using SLRs. I mean, we ditched the SLR even in Guard Force probably 2 years before then.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had SLRs,
Yeah.
which is fine. But yeah, I take my hat off to those guys. They had it quite tough, and of course, who wants to be in a war miles from their home, you know?
Exactly. I mean, they were put into some really hairy situations.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
with 5,000 or 6,000 these heavily armed guys, and some of them just had like batons, or it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And in SLR, it was pathetic.
Now you would know. I don't know if you've heard of the Conservative politician in the UK, Ian Duncan Smith.
Yes.
You know, he was in Rhodesia at the time with the Commonwealth forces.
Oh, right.
He was a captain in the Scots Guards, and he was like one of the adjutants for whoever based in Salisbury. He's the only, well, yeah, he's quite a famous guy. But he served in the Commonwealth forces. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still have a picture in my mind of that plane landing somewhere in the southeast or the northeast, and all the RLI guys have bent and pulled their trousers down to show their brown eyes.
Yes.
That was the average welcome from us.
Oh yeah, no less than they deserved.
Yeah, but it you know it was done in good humor, but also with a fair bit of angst thrown in as well.
Yeah,
and yeah, I used to see them driving around all over the show with the cross on the Land Rovers and on the helicopters and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, my cousin from South Africa, Barry, I forget his surname now, strange, but he was the pilot on one of the choppers that they used up here.
Okay.
He also flew Abel Muzarewa around. He was Abel's pilot. Yeah. Interesting days, those.
Yeah. I mean, I must admit, I was not to get too political, but I found that we missed the boat a little bit with Muzarewa.
Mm-hmm.
That was our chance to have some sort of appeasement with the West and some sort of appeasement with the local populace. I know he got hammered with the Mugabe elections, but if only we had recognition at that point then the country would be entirely different.
I think it was not something that we didn't do. It was something that the Brits and Americans didn't recognize, because
Yes,
he
hey,
got,
that's what I mean. Yeah.
he got 67% of the vote, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And I think it was free and fair. But the straw that broke the camel's back was the Nigerian oil, where the British owned all the Nigerian oil.
Ah, okay.
And the Nigerian president said, another election or we take your oil. And
Yeah.
that's what broke her back. So
Money talks, Tony. Money
it is.
talks.
At the end of the day, the whole war was to gain the assets of the country.
Yes.
It was nothing about pro-communism, anti-communism. That was just all a political.
Get those assets, then hand it over to the Chinese.
Yes. yes. And that's there's if you go down all the rabbit holes, yeah, you end up in Beijing somewhere.
Yeah. So just to close, I don't know if you've got anything else, but that was my last camp, was in Gwanda, with the Commonwealth forces. I didn't do a camp at the Mugabe elections, and shortly thereafter, it was January 1980 when the unit was disbanded.
Wow, they disbanded it 5 months before the elections.
Yeah. Well,
4 months.
it might have been 81. Sorry, might have been
81. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was the first unit that Mugabe disbanded.
Good Lord, eh?
Yeah, and he disbanded a few, but obviously scouts, etc.
Yes.
But he disbanded Guard Force, which employed, as I say, over 7,000 people. You know, where those guys went, I don't know.
On that, well, they're one of the 4 million living in South Africa.
Oh, probably.
It's really sad, but anyway, it's been a very good talk. What year did you leave? In the end, George?
We left. We gave Mugabe a year, and we left in. Well, at that time people were flooding out.
Yeah.
We left in 1981. I think it was March 81. I had a contact that worked for Hewlett Aluminium in Pietermaritzburg, a metallurgist that I knew, and I contacted him and I went down there for an interview, and they took me on, and we transferred there, like most people, with next to nothing. Anyway.
And ironically, the first 10 years under Bobby weren't too bad. That's when I established my construction company and did very well. But then it was up to the farm idiocy that broke it all up,
Right.
Yeah.
So you were in South Africa as well?
No, I'm local, born and bred in Rhodesia.
Oh, I see. Okay.
My dad was an Englishman, and he was in the Royal Air Force, and he used to fix bomber engines and all that sort of stuff.
All right.
They posted him to. I've got to take a doctor's call. We'll just edit this. Don't worry.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that, George.
No problem.
He'll splice it together.
Yeah.
So you left. What years was that?
Yeah, we left 81 to go to Pietermaritzburg, and I worked for Hewlett's Aluminium for about 6 months, and then I moved to another electronics company, and in manufacturing, because that was my sort of training, in manufacturing in Pietermaritzburg, and we did very well there. I eventually rose to the level of managing director of that company, which interestingly employed only coloured women, because it was a lot of intricate assembly work, and they're good at that, I suppose.
Yeah.
So that was a reasonable company. We supplied South African military. We supplied DFI. Do you remember DFI, that made cookers in Durban?
No, I can't say I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, it was a big. They were in just outside Durban, and that was what. And Barlow's communications and Barlow's engineering, we supplied up and down the country, and then I was there probably 10 years maybe, and we decided to come back to Guernsey, where we had first started. And I worked for a couple of electronics companies here, and that type of thing, and retired, thankfully, 5 years ago. Best decision ever made.
Oh, yes, it is. It's brilliant. I'm retired too. And you obviously started out with a degree in metallurgy, did you?
No. I did all my training when I actually went to Risco.
Wow.
Did all the quality control courses, all the metallurgical courses. Not degree level, but we did all those technical courses, and a smattering of engineering and that type of thing. So, yeah, that's where we got our basis from. And I
Well,
ended up working for, well, my last job, where I was there 11 years in Guernsey, was for Specsavers.
really
Yeah.
amazing.
I don't know if you know this, but the international headquarters for that company is in Guernsey.
Ah,
Yeah, they employ about, I don't know, 300 or 400 people, and that's the central. So that's the central bit where they have, they've got the legal, they've got the design, they've got operations, product development, all that, business development, all that sort of thing. It's all based here.
and
Great company.
what did you do in a company like that with your knowledge? What was your role?
Well, my role was initially was opening new stores. So it was an investigation into towns, investigation into, I mean, it's a big investment for those, and I opened, you got to select the partners, you've got to select the town, you've got to select the store, you've got to, they're very highly involved. And in the end, I opened something like 21 stores throughout the country, most of which were in Scotland. The accent come in handy.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Well,
And where is it you live, Tony?
I live in Salisbury in England, in Wiltshire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I I'm about to have a cataract removed in this one, so
Right.
I'll be going to Specsavers soon, I'm sure, I believe they set the lens at long distance and you got to get glasses for close up. So
Oh,
something like that. That's what I've heard. But anyway,
yeah. Well, interest. I usually wear contact lenses,
well,
and my vision. I don't know if it's anything special or if it's odd, but anyway, if I close this eye, I can read. If I close that eye, I can drive. So they're both
yes,
different strengths.
same as
Anyway,
mine. The brain
yes.
joins it together and
Yeah.
everybody's happy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a lovely company to work for, and as I say, I retired 5 years ago, and 2 years ago I went to Australia to see my brother, the POU guy, and we were there for, I don't know, 7 or 8 weeks.
You know, I think it's fair to talk about what guys did after their time in Rhodesia as well. And in fact, some people have asked me to do this, and that's why I'm letting this little talk carry on, because I've been absolutely fascinated by what some of the guys have achieved.
Yeah, yeah.
Like Loris Basson, he just did little bits in the South African Air Force when he went down there after serving in Rhodesia.
Uh-huh.
Loris Basson, and has ended up as one of the main structural test guys in Canada for the Air Force.
Wow.
It's just
Incredible.
incredible. And
Yeah.
I think the training is very good in Southern Africa generally,
Yes.
and it stood everybody in very good stead.
Yeah.
Some of my school pals, I'm just left gobsmacked at what they've achieved.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And yeah, but anyway,
That's
uh,
true. It's true.
George, thank you very much for
Pleasure.
coming on board, and the sound worked well this time.
Pleasure.
So in 3, 4, 5 weeks, this should be out, and I'm sure you'll get lots of positive comments. So thank you very much for your time.
No problem at all. And I suppose you've got others in the pipeline. Have you different units, different guys?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, because we are really struggling to get people to talk. I don't know what it is. A lot of people seem to have this, oh, it's in the past, forget it, or oh, my story's not worth anything, or I didn't do enough. And it's not about that.
No.
It's about the history of Rhodesia.
Yeah.
I want to interview people who were involved in logistics. I mean,
Yeah.
we never went a day without fuel, food, or ammunition during the entire war.
No.
There was a brain behind that.
Yeah.
I would like to interview that person.
Yes.
I want to interview nurses, policewomen,
Yes.
wives. So if you want this history to continue, you people out there listening to and watching this, please contact me in the email below. My
Yeah.
email address is below this.
Yeah, no, good call, Tony. As I say, the only reason, not the only reason, but the reason that I was happy to do it was because Guard Force is very low on the agenda in general terms, and I don't think a lot of people know the story or the history or what their contribution was, and that's the reason. That's the reason. I mean, when I set up the website for Guard Force, probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, I could count on one hand the number of Guard Force guys that have contacted me.
Gee.
Because they're a dying breed, literally as well as figuratively.
That's another problem. Age is now hitting many of us. Many guys are computer illiterate. You can't believe what I go through to get these productions done.
Yeah.
And John does a lovely job editing as well.
Anyway, I'll speak to the POU guy.
Thank you. And I'll tell you something. My estimation of Guard Force has gone up.
Oh, good.
To my shame, when I was serving, I didn't think much of internal affairs. I thought they were just a bunch of guys doing this and that.
Yeah.
But after the last 3 interviews that we've had, I tell you, my estimation of them has gone through the roof. And my estimation of you guys has gone up substantially as well.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
I think these it's more than one purpose behind these interviews. It's really
so it's a big achievement. Good.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay,
and
George.
Keep well.
You too, my friend. All the very best for the future. Hey.
Okay, thank you, and you. I'll be in touch.
God bless. Yes. Bye-bye.
Thank you.